You don't notice it at first. Not as a thought, not even as a feeling. Just a pause, subtle, quiet, no louder than a blink. Something shifts inside you, like the air in a room after a door is gently closed. There is no announcement, no flashing sign, no great realization. Just a soft flicker, an uncertainty, a wondering. A moment in which your mind gently turns towards something it doesn't yet understand. This is where it begins. Not with facts, not with instruments, not with theories, but with a sense that something doesn't quite fit. A pebble in the shoe of your thoughts. A breath caught halfway, waiting. Science doesn't always arrive with a lab coat. Sometimes it arrives in the quietest corners of your day, in the shape of a shadow that falls in the wrong direction, or the way a leaf curls differently on just one tree. You are not trying to solve anything, not yet. You're simply aware that the world has offered a riddle, and somewhere in you, a door creaks open. This moment is smaller than a spark, and yet it holds the whole universe inside it, because here, at the very edge of thought, your mind begins. To lean in, it is like standing on the shore, hearing the hush of the ocean for the first time. You don't yet know how deep it is, or how far the waves go. You only know that something is calling you in, and this call, the first breath of wonder, isn't loud. It doesn't shout your name. It whispers with a question you can't quite name. A child might feel it watching dust dance in sunlight. A stargazer might feel it when the sky opens wider than expected. Even a scientist, years into their field, feels it still. That familiar tug toward the unknown, it is not curiosity, not yet. It is something more fragile. A stillness pregnant with possibility. A sense that something sacred and strange has brushed past you and left a trace. The brain quiets, but the mind stirs. Not to explain, but to notice. You feel the stretch of your attention, the slow gathering of focus. Like the first light in a sleeping room, even the body feels it. Your breath slows. Your posture tilts forward. You become still without realizing it, as if listening for something just out of reach. And this stillness, it isn't empty. It is full. Full of something ancient and immediate, as if the question you're about to ask has been waiting for you all along. Your mind, like a deep lake, begins to reflect. You notice that noticing feels good, that paying attention becomes its own kind of reward. You want to follow the thread, even if you don't yet know where it leads. Some part of you knows this is not about answers. Not yet. This is about asking, about being present at the moment. When something becomes possible, in this state, everything seems alive with potential. The ordinary becomes strange again. The world, familiar and yet unfamiliar, stretches out its hand to you. What is light, really? Why do seeds turn toward the sun? Why you remember some things and forget others? These aren't just facts waiting to be found. They are invitations. Each one a gentle knock on the door of understanding. And you don't need to know everything. You only need to be open. To sit with the question, to let it bloom slowly. Like the moon rising without hurry, with the tide creeping in. The question unfolds its quiet rhythm inside you. Even your dreams begin to echo it. A soft murmur through the subconscious, turning and shifting like pebbles in a stream. And in this rhythm, science begins. Not with equations, but with wonder made steady. With all allowed to linger long enough to become a path. There is no rush. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, at the still, shimmering start of something profound. You are learning to stay inside the question, not to solve it too quickly, because something sacred lives in the not knowing. The first breath of wonder is fragile. It must be protected from noise, from urgency, from the need to be certain. Instead, you let it be. Like a candle flame, flickering but whole. You are here. breathing with the question, not trying to tame it, but to understand its shape. And slowly, as you rest in this space, you begin to feel something new take form, a quiet desire to know more. To ask not because you must, but because you are ready. From this breath, curiosity will rise. But for now, stay here, at the edge of the unknown, where something has stirred inside you and everything is waiting to unfold. You do not need to chase it. You only need to follow it gently. Don't let yourself listen to the space behind the thought, the opening and the silence. Because soon, curiosity will speak. And when it does, it will open a new kind of room in your mind, one shaped not by answers, but by the quiet pull of the next chapter's question. It begins softly, so softly you might miss it. Not with excitement or urgency, but with a gentle widening. Your thoughts, once settled and folded, begin to stretch. Not toward an answer, but toward the possibility of one. This is not the rush of needing to know. It is the warmth of wanting, the wonder, a kind of inner stillness that invites movement. Like the way a forest clears just enough for light to touch the floor, curiosity does not push, it opens. A doorway within your mind, not grand or glowing, but quiet and warm and just slightly ajar. You do not know what lies beyond, but you feel. Pulled out, you step forward not to conquer, but to explore. Because this space, this room inside you, feels like it has been waiting for you to arrive. And all it asks is that you stay a while. You don't yet need tools or answers. You don't even need the right words. You only need to notice. The way questions form like dew on the edge of awareness. Stop. Why does that happen? What else could be true? Is there something I'm not seeing yet? They come as whispers, not demands. They arrive not to disturb your peace, but to deepen it. To remind you that wondering is its own kind of calm. There's something almost sacred in this mental opening. Like the way your chest rises when you breathe deeply, or the way your eyes widen at dusk when the stars begin to appear one by one. Inside this space, you feel both small and vast, as if you are held within something ancient and yet also given the freedom to roam. The universe, for a moment, becomes your companion. You may not realize it, but this is the mind's most human act. To look beyond the known, to stretch toward the invisible, not to grasp it, but to touch it with thought. Animals are curious too. A raven tilting its head, an octopus poking through a jar, a cat following a rustle in the leaves. But you carry your curiosity into abstraction, into symbols and systems, into dreams and theories. You wonder not only what, but why. And when you step into that wondering, your mind becomes a landscape. Each idea a hill, each unknown a horizon. And you begin to walk not fast, but with presence. You start to feel the terrain of the question, where it rises, where it falls, what it touches, what it leaves untouched. And in doing so, you become part of it. This is the space curiosity opens, a field of quiet invitation. It doesn't close around you. It expands as you move through it. You might feel uncertain here, and that's good. Uncertainty is not fear, it is possibility. It means you have not rushed ahead. It means you are listening. Sometimes, a single question can open many doors, each one a slightly different angle, each one showing a new flicker of meaning. You learn to follow where the light is softest. There are no wrong steps here. Even the paths that circle back teach you something about the shape of the question and about the shape of your own thinking. Curiosity makes the familiar strange again. It allows you to look at a puddle and see not just water but reflection, depth, gravity, memory. It invites you to take nothing for granted. Why does rain fall in drops and not in sheets? Why does time feel slower when we're waiting? Why? Do we dream? Each question opens another room, and inside each room, a new silence waits. Not empty silence, but the kind that hums with potential. Here, your mind is not racing. It is resting while reaching, relaxed in its effort, patient in its pace. This is the rhythm of discovery. Long before discovery arrives, you begin to notice your own thoughts more clearly. How they move, how they return, how they pause. You are not only looking outward, you are observing the one who looks. This is the beauty of curiosity. It is reflective as much as it is seeking. Some moments feel weightless, like floating in an idea. Others feel grounding, like finding your feet in new understanding. Either way, the motion is gentle. Science is not a sprint. It is a slow unfolding, and it begins here, in this room that your mind has opened, where no one rushes you, where no one demands a result. It is enough to ask. It is enough to be with the question, to walk its contours with soft attention, to let the unknown become familiar through presence. And slowly, something begins to shift. You feel the question reaching back, as if it has noticed you too, as if the universe has leaned a little closer. You do not yet seek answers, but you begin to imagine how you might look for them. What kind of light might reveal something new? What kind of method might let the mystery speak? And in this imagining, you take your first true step, not toward a solution, but toward participation. You are not just wondering, you are beginning to investigate, softly, patiently, with care. This space will not close behind you. It will grow with you, room by room, as you ask and observe and revise and begin again. Curiosity does not need to be solved. It needs to be sustained, fed with attention, watered with silence. Let it stay open. Let it stretch inside you like breath, because very soon, that wondering will gather into something more focused. A shape will emerge from the question, an idea you can begin to test. And then, the question will find its voice. Sometimes, you sense something stirring long before you can name it. A shift, soft and slow, begins deep within you. Not in your mouth, not in your mind, but somewhere unspoken, somewhere quieter than thought. It isn't a sentence. It isn't even a word. It's a pause, a pull, a tingling awareness. A question that does not yet know it's a question. You feel it in the way your breath catches for no reason, in the way your eyes linger just a little too long, in the way you lie awake, not anxious, but alert, as if something just beneath your understanding is waiting to be seen. There is a kind of silence that holds meaning, not the silence of absence, but the silence of things becoming. Here, in this quiet, a question is being born. The mind is a landscape not yet mapped. And here, your thoughts move like shadows, not clear, not sharp, but real in their own hidden way. It is like walking through mist at dawn. You can't see far ahead, but every step forward reveals just enough to take the next. And so, you keep walking, following what you feel more than what you know. Scientists call it intuition. A hunch, an impression that something is there, even if the evidence has not yet arrived. You feel it in your body, a quiet tension in the chest, a stillness behind your eyes, a sense that your whole self is listening for something just beyond reach. Children live in this space without trying. They reach out to the world with open wonder, not needing to name what they see, but still pulled by the mystery of it. What is that sound? Why does the wind move like that? What's inside a rock? They do not ask these things as scientists. They ask as beings aware of the unknown, untroubled by the fact that their questions have no shape yet. And you, even now, carry that same soft ability to feel the presence of a question without having to catch it in words, to hold it gently in your ray. Thoughts like holding water in your hands. Your brain, beneath awareness, begins to light up. Tiny signals move through networks of meaning, linking memories, sensations, fragments of knowledge, gathering them into something not quite seen, but almost understood. This is how questions grow. Not all at once, but in small, quiet accumulations. A layer here, a glimpse there, until slowly the form begins to rise from within. It is like listening for music in the hum of the world. At first, just noise, but then a pattern, a rhythm, a pulse you cannot unhear. The brain is made for this. To notice before naming, to gather before explaining, to feel the shape of what it does not yet define. When you follow this process, you allow your mind to speak in its oldest language, the language of sensation, attention, and emotional pull. The mind reaches before it builds. You may find yourself sketching something you don't yet understand, or walking in circles, lost in thought that has no words. You may dream of symbols, of shapes, of strange connections. And still, the question remains unspoken, alive, but unnamed. This is the prelude to all discovery. This is where science grows, underground and unseen. Not in the clarity of conclusion, but in the rich, messy soil of not knowing. Sometimes it's a feeling in your gut, a discomfort with how things are usually explained, an itch in your thoughts that says, there's something more. And you learn to trust that signal, to lean into the soft hum of dissatisfaction, because every great question begins this way, as a whisper in the dark, as a feeling that something doesn't fit, as a shimmer on the edge of understanding. The moment before language is tender. If you rush it, it might scatter. If you force it into form too quickly, you risk shaping it into what it is. Instead, you let it sit. You let it breathe. You walk with it in silence, like walking beside a friend who doesn't need to speak. And then, slowly, the question begins to gather its edges. It begins to show you its outline. You don't make it happen. You listen for it. You let the mind rest, and resting, it reveals. You might notice it while washing dishes, or in the rhythm of footsteps on a quiet road. The words will arrive not with a crash, but like leaves settling after wind. A simple thought. What if this works differently than I thought? Or, why does this pattern keep appearing? Or, could there be another reason? Now, the question has begun to speak. Not in full sentences, but in fragments. And you are there to receive it, to hold it gently, to follow it slowly. There is no need to capture it all at once. Just let it unfold, bit by bit, like moonlight stretching across a lake. You are not solving anything yet. You are witnessing the formation, the transition from feeling to thought, from shimmer to shape. And this moment, this space where questions rise from silence, is one of the most delicate and powerful moments in science. It is the bridge between sensing and speaking, between knowing and wondering. When you honor the question before it has words, you respect the mystery itself. You make room for deeper insight. You walk in rhythm with the way the mind was made to explore. And as the question finally begins to form, you may notice that it does not come alone. It brings others with it, a constellation of curiosities, each one gently pulling you forward. You are not rushing. You are arriving. And now that the question has begun to take shape, you can begin to give it voice. And in that giving, something changes. You become not just a listener, but the speaker. And now, your question is ready to be asked out loud. There is a moment quiet and complete, where you haven't yet found the answer, but you've also stopped pretending that you already know. A moment suspended between wondering and understanding, where the air feels thick with possibility and stillness. It isn't confusion. It isn't ignorance. It is something else, a resting point in the mind where you gently admit, I do not. Yet no. This is not a weakness. This is a doorway. You are standing at the edge of clarity, but you are not ready to cross. Instead, you stand in that tender place where questions echo softly, and nothing is urgent, yet everything matters. There is no need to solve anything yet. No need to chase the conclusion. The world isn't closing in. It is opening wide to linger. In this moment is a kind of strength. It takes patience to stay here, in the landscape of uncertainty, where nothing is labeled, but everything is present. Your thoughts move slowly now, not because they are heavy, but because they are deliberate. Each one lands with care, like the first drops of rain on dry earth. The brain is made for this pause. A pause between sensing and deciding, between asking and answering. Neuroscientists might call it cognitive openness, a state where the mind relaxes its grip on certainty and lets new patterns emerge. In this moment, you are deeply receptive. Your brain isn't inactive. It's watching, waiting, adjusting. It's gathering fragments from memory, listening to the rhythms of the body, sorting possibilities in silence. You may feel uncertain, but uncertainty is not the absence of knowledge. It is the presence of possibility. Think of a bird resting before it takes flight, wings half open, feathers lifted by the wind. That bird doesn't know the exact path it will take, but it knows it's ready to rise. This moment is like that. A readiness to leap, but not just yet. You are still gathering the wind. Sometimes, this moment comes in stillness. You're walking, alone, and your thoughts drift towards something that doesn't fit, a contradiction, a mystery, a quiet itch of curiosity. Sometimes it comes in conversation. When someone says something simple, but it rearranges the furniture in your mind. You sit quietly, letting the shift settle. And sometimes it comes as discomfort, a sense that the answers you've held no longer feel whole. They've begun to fray at the edges, and now you are standing in the space they've left behind. This space is fragile, not because it is weak, but because it must be handled gently. You cannot force the knowing. You can only invite it, and the invitation begins with honesty. You admit that something doesn't make sense. You allow your thoughts to sit down beside your question without rushing to solve it. In this moment, you are not trying to prove. You are listening. You are letting your mind adjust to the new shape the world might take if you look at it differently. This is the essence of science. Not just discovering answers, but learning how to live in the questions. There is a reason the greatest discoveries often begin with the simplest acts. Pausing, observing, wondering. Not with noise, but with quiet attention. Einstein once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning, but even more important is learning how to dwell in the beautiful discomfort of not knowing." That discomfort is not there to unsettle you. It is there to guide you, like standing in a darkened room, your eyes slowly adjusting to the faintest light, your senses open, your breathing slowed. You begin to notice things you would have missed in the brightness, the curve of a shadow, the hush of still air, the distant shimmer of meaning. In the brain, this is the moment when neural pathways shift, when your mind reorganizes itself, preparing to see things from another angle. The unfamiliar becomes a signal, not a threat. You do not need to chase certainty. You only need to remain curious, to let the unknown remain unknown, just a little longer. This is what the moment before knowing offers you, a chance to grow in the absence of resolution, a space to stretch toward insight without needing to grasp it all at once. The scientist in you knows this moment well. The artist in you lives here. The child in you remembers it. It is the place of first wonder, and it remains sacred no matter how many times you visit. So sit here a while, in this space where your question has taken shape, but not yet direction. In the soft dusk between sensing and understanding, let the mind be unhurried. Let the mystery remain open. There is no pressure to resolve it now. The pause is not in the way. The pause is the way, and as you breathe in the stillness, you begin to notice something subtle, a gentle shift in how your question feels. It no longer floats in you, vague and formless. It begins to carry weight, to ask for form, to ask for expression. You feel your thoughts turning, slowly, gently, toward the moment when you will try to give your question a voice. But not just yet. First, let it settle. Let it deepen. Let it lean into language at its own pace. Because soon, very soon, the question will begin to ask itself aloud. When you ask a question, you often believe you're starting fresh, opening a window into the unknown, stepping into possibility. But long before the question forms, something else has already shaped its edges. Your assumptions. Assumptions are the quiet floor beneath your thoughts. They are what you think you know without noticing that you know it. They are the hidden scaffolding on which your questions rest. You rarely feel them. They are like the gravity of the mind, silent, invisible, but always pulling. They hold your ideas in a certain shape, bending the possible into the familiar. You assume that time moves forward, that cause comes before effect, that light behaves a certain way, that your senses give you truth. And most of the time, these assumptions help. They keep you grounded, give your thinking structure, let you build questions on something solid. But what happens when that solid ground isn't so solid? What if the thing you never thought to question is the thing that needs to be questioned? Most, you begin to notice how deep these foundations go, how they quietly shape what you think is worth asking. You ask how something works, because you've assumed it does work. You ask where something begins, because you've assumed it has a beginning. These aren't wrong. They're just invisible. And to see them is not to lose your footing, but to become more awake inside your mind. This is the moment when your curiosity sharpens. Not because you want answers faster, but because you want to understand the question better. You begin to ask, what am I assuming right now? What have I decided without realizing it? Your questions become mirrors. They reflect back not just the world, but the shape of your own thinking. Think of early astronomers. Long before telescopes, when the Earth was believed to be the unmoving center of all things, they looked at the stars with brilliant care, but always from the assumption that Earth was still. And so their models were beautiful, but tangled, always trying to explain what didn't quite fit. It wasn't until someone questioned that silent belief, not the stars, not the math, but the assumption itself, that a new understanding could grow. The same thing happens in your mind. You build elegant thoughts on silent beliefs, until one day, something doesn't fit. And instead of forcing the world to match the model, you ask whether the model itself might shift. This is where science meets humility. Not the humility of doubt, but the humility of awareness, a willingness to see that your own view is just one path through the forest. Even language carries assumptions. When you ask, why does this happen? You've already assumed that it does. When you say, what caused this? You assume that cause is even a useful idea for this case. To notice these invisible frameworks is not easy. It takes stillness. It takes patience, and it takes a kind of inner bravery to look down and realize the ground might move. But what a gift it is to see clearly, to know not just what you're thinking, but what you're thinking with. Your beliefs are not bad. They are tools, and like any tool, they must be held with care. Some of them are ancient, carried in your culture, your language, your instincts. Some are recent, picked up from books, teachers, memories. All of them are part of how you see. And all of them can be laid gently on the table and looked at again. In this moment of awareness, you are not breaking anything. You are opening space. You might begin to test the strength of your assumptions. Like gently pressing on a floorboard to see if it creaks. You don't need to tear them down. You only need to ask, what if this weren't true? What else could be? This is how ideas begin to flex, how thinking becomes fluid, how the same question can lead to new places just by changing what it rests on. Even the most foundational beliefs in science have shifted with time. That space was empty until it wasn't. That time was constant until it bent. That atoms were indivisible until they weren't. Each shift began not with new data, but with someone asking, what have we assumed too soon? You begin to feel this movement in yourself, a kind of inner unfreezing. You become comfortable with stepping back, not just asking a better question, but asking a freer one. Assumptions are not wrong. They are the scaffolding for understanding. But scaffolding is not the building. And sometimes you must remove a beam to see more sky dot. And so, you move slowly. You begin to notice which thoughts are built on habit, which ones are inherited, which ones have never been spoken aloud. You feel your mind become quieter, less eager to know quickly, more willing to know deeply. And with this quietness, a new clarity begins to emerge. The question you were asking, it begins to feel different. Not less urgent, but more open. You realize it was shaped by more than just curiosity. It was shaped by what you believed was even possible to ask. And now, you are free to reshape it. You feel the ground beneath your thinking shift. Not in a way that makes you fall, but in a way that makes you move. You are not standing still anymore. You are stepping carefully, eyes open, mind awake. And somewhere in that gentle motion, a new kind of tension begins to rise. Not a fear, but a pull. A subtle pressure inside your thoughts. A desire not just to wonder, but to reach. There is a feeling that rises when a question truly settles inside you. It is not panic, not pressure, but something more like a pull, gentle but persistent. A quiet inner gravity that draws your thoughts forward. You feel it in your chest, in your fingertips, in the pause between breaths. A readiness, not yet action. A tension, but not the kind that clenches. This is a tension that opens, like the string of a bow drawn back, holding energy without release. Like a tide just beginning to shift beneath the moon, its weight sensed before it moves. You do not ask simply to ask. You ask because something inside you wants to stretch, to reach, across a space that shouldn't stay empty, to feel the arc between what is known and what is waiting. This is the ache of wonder. A soft ache, like the way your lungs ache after laughing. Not painful, just full. Just too alive to be still. Science does not begin with answers. It begins with this tension. This pressure at the edge of your thoughts that gently urges you onward. And it is not just curiosity. It is need. Not the kind that cries out, but the kind that quietly insists, I must know more. This need is what keeps you turning questions in your mind, even when no one is watching. It is what makes you wake in the middle of the night, still wondering why the stars shine as they do. It is what draws your eyes again and again to patterns you don't yet understand. You are built for this. Your brain is wired not only to survive, but to seek, to complete unfinished patterns, to move toward the light of comprehension like a plant leaned toward the sun. This is no accident. In biology, the hunger to understand is as real as the hunger for food. It pushes life to grow not just upward, but inward, to God, and so you follow it. This tension that pulls you forward, you don't resist. You don't rush. You simply notice how it guides you. Sometimes it feels like curiosity, sometimes like restlessness, sometimes like hope. But always, beneath it, there is a gap, a space, between what is and what could be known. That space is sacred. It is the invitation to explore. And the tension you feel is the thread that carries you across it is easy to mistake this tension for discomfort, to want to fill it quickly with an answer, any answer. But not all hunger must be fed at once. Sometimes the waiting is what gives depth to the discovery. Sometimes the not knowing is what keeps the mind wide enough to find something truly new. And so you learn to rest inside the tension, to sit with it, to walk beside it, to let it become part of you, like a violin held in perfect readiness, like a sail catching the first wind, like a question perched just before flight. You may notice that the tension changes over time. It doesn't always pull in the same direction. Sometimes it leads you towards simplicity, a need to clarify, to distill. Other times it pulls you into complexity, into layers, into systems, into strange connections. You follow where it leads, not to escape the unknown, but to become more at home within it. This pull is what guided the first scientists, the first thinkers, the first dreamers. The same force that draws a child to lift a stone, a poet to look at the stars, a physicist to ask what came before time. It is not separate from you. It is you, in motion. Your own awareness gathering momentum. And in that momentum, you begin to build a bridge. From wondering to seeking, from tension to intention. You start to feel a question take form. Not just emotionally, but structurally. You want to know something specific. You want to test the pull. You want to see what lies just beyond your reach. And yet, even as you reach, you carry the softness of wonder with you. You do not harden into certainty. You stay fluid, like water filling the shape of the unknown, because the tension is not your enemy. It is your compass. It points not to where the answer is, but to where the learning lives. This is why you ask. Not to end the tension, but to honor it. To follow it like a path, one step at a time, into deeper attention. And as you move forward, that pull sharpens into something more focused. The question you've been holding begins to ask for structure, for precision, for testability. You're no longer only feeling the gap. You are beginning to measure it, to trace its edges with care. The ache of wonder becomes the seed of method. The quiet longing to understand becomes a map of possibility. And so you walk, not with haste, but with intention. And just ahead, in the soft curve of this unfolding path, something begins to rise, a plan, a design, a way to ask the question. Not just inwardly, but out loud to the world. Not every question begins with intention. Some arrive like weather, unexpected, soft, and unstoppable. They blow in uninvited and settle somewhere deep inside you before you even realize what they are. You are not searching. You are simply moving through your day. Perhaps walking down a familiar road, or washing a dish, or reading something small and ordinary. And then suddenly you feel it. A question, not yours, but now it is. It brushes past your awareness like a breeze you didn't expect. And just like that, you are no longer where you were. Something inside you has turned. You didn't ask for it. You didn't choose it, but it has chosen you. And now it hums beneath your thoughts like a low, constant tone. This is not curiosity you reached for. This is curiosity that reached for you. It might begin as confusion, a flicker of contradiction in something you thought was true, a sentence that doesn't quite make sense, a pattern that repeats when it shouldn't, something that makes you pause, then return, then wonder. Or it might begin with awe of beauty so quiet and vast that it startles you into stillness, the intricate veins of a leaf, the strange symmetry of a seashell, the way your heart keeps time with rhythms you don't control. You weren't looking for anything, but the world handed you a puzzle gentle but insistent. And now it sits in your lap, waiting to be held. You feel it change your posture. Your attention narrows. Your breath slows. You begin to notice what you hadn't before. The question becomes a lens. Suddenly, Everything you see passes through it. Everything reflects it. Why does this happen? What else could this mean? How deep does this go? You carry the question with you now. Not in your hands, but in your noticing. It follows you into quiet. Moments, whispers in the shower, echoes in your dreams, shadows on your walks. And this is how you know it matters. It stays. It doesn't fade with distraction. It doesn't vanish when you close your notebook. It grows in the gaps. It lives in the stillness. Some people call this obsession. But obsession is heavy and restless. This is lighter, more like a thread gently tugging at your sleeve. It doesn't rush you, but it does not let go. You begin to make room for it. Your thoughts reorganize. You leave space around your usual routines, space for this uninvited companion who now feels like a part of you. This question does not demand answers right away. It asks only that you listen, that you stay close, that you remain willing to be changed, because sometimes the question is not just about the world. It is about the way you see the world. And once your vision shifts, it doesn't return to where it was. Think of Newton watching the fall of an apple, noticing what others had seen 1,000 times. But for him, in that moment, the fall became a doorway. Or of Marie Curie, watching the strange glow of uranium salts in a darkened room. She wasn't seeking magic, but she found a mystery that wouldn't let her rest. These are the questions that find you, and they find you not because you are special, but because you are open, because your mind is quiet enough to notice, because you are willing to feel the weight of the unknown. There is a strange intimacy in these moments. The question becomes part of your inner life. You tend to it, like a flame you don't want to blow out. And with time, it begins to take shape. It becomes clearer, sharper, more specific. What began as a soft ache becomes a form, a pattern you can name, a curiosity you can pursue. But something else happens too. You begin to realize that this question is not yours alone. Others have felt it. Others have followed it. You are stepping into a shared wondering that stretches back through time. And so, you begin to seek out traces. You read, you listen, you trace the question's path through other minds, other generations. You find that you are not the first to ask. And yet your asking still matters, because every question, even the ancient ones, are born anew in each person who feels them. And this version, the one shaped by you, will look different and may lead somewhere no one else has gone. That is the beauty of being found by a question. You join a quiet lineage of listeners, noticers, seekers. People who, in their own quiet ways, have let the world speak through its mysteries. You carry the question now with care, not with the urgency to solve, but with the reverence to understand. It has become part of your rhythm, part of your way of moving through thought. And slowly a deeper longing arises, not just to hold the question, but to give it shape, to offer it structure, to design a way to ask it out loud, not just to yourself, but to the world. There is a direction your mind leans before you choose it. A quiet pull, subtle as the tilt of a sunflower toward the sun. You may think you're deciding where to look, what to study, what to ask. But long before decision, there is drift. This drift isn't random. It's a current deep within you, formed by your experiences, your memories, your curiosities. It moves beneath thought, beneath words, even like an invisible thread tugging at the edge of your awareness. You follow it without fully realizing you are. You pause a little longer at one detail. You return to a certain idea again and again. You notice patterns in the things you notice. And slowly, a path begins to take shape beneath your feet. You are not chasing what is urgent, but what is resonant. Not what demands attention, but what deserves it, at least in the quiet space of your own mind. This is the mind's silent compass. Not a device of metal and needle, but a quiet alignment inside you, pointing not to north, but to meaning. You don't control it exactly, but you can listen to it. You can feel when something feels true, not in the sense of fact, but in the sense of fit, a feeling that says, yes, this belongs here. Scientists call this instinct or intuition, a subtle sense that something is worth exploring. It isn't proof. It isn't evidence. But it's the beginning of attention, and attention is where science begins. It starts when you choose without always knowing why to give more space to something. A ripple in your thoughts, a whisper in the data, a feeling that this detail matters more than others. And maybe it does. Maybe it's nothing. But your compass leans in that direction anyway. And so you follow. Think of a scientist standing in a laboratory, surrounded by hundreds of samples, all carefully labeled, measured, arranged. And yet, one of them catches her eye. Not because it looks different, but because something inside her stirs. She cannot explain it yet. She just knows. This one. The compass moves quietly, never shouting, never explaining, only guiding. It's the same with a poet, a painter, an inventor. That first, unspoken motion of the mind. Here. Start here. And so you do. Not because it's efficient. Not because it's logical. But because it feels like the right place to begin. This is not the opposite of reason. It is the ground where reason can grow. Because to reason well, you must first choose where to direct your reasoning. You must choose what to care about. And that choosing happens quietly, like walking through a forest and deciding, almost without thinking, which tree to sit beneath. It isn't calculated. It's felt. Your compass responds to the landscape inside you, to the books you've read, the questions you've lived, the tiny moments that shaped you when you weren't even paying attention. And so two people can look at the same world and feel drawn to entirely different things. One sees a question in the stars. Another sees it in a cell. Another in the patterns of bird flight or the way people speak to one another. Each of them is following the gentle tug of their own compass, and none of them are wrong. This is what makes science so vast, so alive. It does not move only in straight lines, but in 1,000 branching paths, each one walked by someone listening to something within. And sometimes, the compass pulls you towards something inconvenient, something that doesn't fit your plans, your timeline, your expertise. You may resist. You may try to look away. But the tug remains. And if you're honest, you follow it. Because meaning, once glimpsed, does not let go easily. You might not know where it will lead. You might not even know how to ask the right question yet. But you begin. You turn toward it. And in that turning, the work begins to take shape. The compass isn't always right. It doesn't promise answers, but it promises direction. And direction is enough. You are not drifting without purpose. You are listening, adjusting, aligning. This is what it means to be a scientist of your own attention. To notice what draws you and to honor that noticing is something real. In a world full of noise, it's easy to lose track of the signal, to mistake urgency for importance, to follow only what is measurable. But the compass doesn't measure. It guides, and you begin to trust it. Not blindly, but gently. You learn to pause when it stirs, to lean in when something flickers, to let yourself be led. And this is how the question becomes clearer. Not suddenly, but steadily. A form begins to emerge like a sculpture beneath the hands. You are shaping something. Yes, but you are also being shaped. The compass leads not only to a question, but to a way of becoming. You follow the mystery, and in doing so, you become the kind of mind that can hold the answer. And as the shape of the question sharpens, you begin to think of tools. How will you approach it? What kind of structure will hold it? What method can you build to match the weight of your wonder? At some point, the question becomes too full to hold. It presses gently against the edges of your mind, asking not only to be pondered, but to be tested, to step beyond thought into the slow unfolding of action. This is the moment when wonder meets method, when you move from asking in silence to building a small, visible reply. You don't yet know the answer. You may not even know the full question, but something in you has turned toward trying. And that is where science begins to breathe. The first attempt is always soft. A hypothesis, yes, but more truly, a whisper. A tentative suggestion offered to the world. What if? You imagine. You guess, but not wildly. Your wondering now leans on what you've noticed, what you've gathered, what your inner compass has drawn you toward. And yet it is still only a guess, a beginning. You reach for materials, for shapes, for models. You sketch the structure of your thought, translating feeling into framework, curiosity into form. This is the craft of experimentation. Not just answering, but listening in a new language, the language of trial. Your first attempt is not polished. It is not final. It is not meant to be. Like a potter shaping the first curve of clay, you begin by placing your hands into the work, feeling how it gives beneath your fingers. It is a collaboration. This moment of early testing. You offer an idea and wait to see what the world returns. Sometimes it returns silence. Sometimes resistance. Sometimes something entirely unexpected. But every response is a thread. You begin to follow them, not with force, but with care. Your first experiment might be small. An observation. A set of variables. A way of seeing more closely. You set it in motion, then you wait. Not in stillness, but in openness. The world does not hurry to answer. It shifts slowly, as if asking whether you are truly listening. And so you listen. You notice what changes, what remains, what doesn't match your idea at all. This noticing is sacred. It is not a disappointment when things don't go as planned. It is a conversation. Your thoughts speaking into reality, and reality speaking back. In the quiet between trial and result, you learn the difference between control and curiosity. You cannot bend nature to your idea, but you can let the idea bend to what nature reveals. This is where humility lives, in the willingness to be reshaped, to see the limits of your first attempt not as failure, but as guidance. Because your first attempt is not about being right. It is about entering the dialogue. It is the first letter sent out into the great unknown. You do not know if it will be read. You do not know how it will return. But still, you send it. You place your idea into the world like a boat into water, unsure of the current, unsure of the weather, but hopeful that it will float. And sometimes it does. Sometimes the result comes back clearer than you imagined. A pattern begins to take shape. A strange behavior repeats. A signal rises from the noise. It's not an answer yet, but it's something. Something more than before. You write it down. You trace its outline. You ask yourself, what does this mean? This is where the mind sharpens, where interpretation begins. Not just what happened, but why. Not just what was seen, but what it suggests. And yet, you are careful. The first result is never the final truth. It is the beginning of refinement. Like turning a stone in your hand, you view it from every angle. You repeat the trial again and again, watching what holds and what falls away. Repetition becomes rhythm. Data becomes shape. And slowly, the experiment becomes a kind of music, a back and forth between you and the world. This is the beauty of scientific thought. It does not demand certainty in one breath. It builds understanding in layers, each one fragile, each one. The first attempt may be small, but it carries something enormous inside. Your willingness to begin. And in that beginning, you grow. Not just as a thinker, but as a listener. Because experiment is not domination. It is attention. You don't force the world to yield its secrets. You ask gently. You observe patiently. And in return, the unknown begins to shift. Sometimes the first attempt confirms your thoughts. Sometimes it breaks them apart. But both are forms of movement. Both are invitations to go deeper. You begin to sense a new tension now. Not just the desire to test, but to understand the pieces of your test. To look closer at the parts that shape what you see. What are you really measuring? What might you be missing? What are the unseen hands guiding your result? Because no experiment lives in isolation. It exists within the rules you've made, within the limits of your tools, within the questions you chose to ask. And so, the first attempt doesn't end with a result. It ends with a reflection and the quiet beginning of a second attempt. You revise. You adjust. You build again, not from scratch, but from the soft knowledge earned in the space between. And slowly, the unknown begins to respond. It leans forward, just a little, enough to say, yes, keep going. You realize now that science isn't a moment of discovery. It's a movement of many moments. Tiny shifts, small corrections, held together by your desire to understand more truly. And as you hold your results, fragile, partial, beautiful, you begin to see something deeper. Not just what the data shows, but what lies beneath it. The invisible threads, the hidden patterns. The first attempt opens the door. But now, you want to look through it. You want to ask, what lies underneath what I've just seen? What forces, what patterns, what causes are quietly shaping what appears? There is a quiet art to measuring the world. It begins not with rulers or numbers, but with noticing. With the moment your attention sharpens just enough to say, this matters. Let me look more closely. Measurement does not strip the world of wonder. It honors it. Like sketching the outline of a tree, not to diminish its branches, but to trace the way they move. You measure because you care, because something caught your eye, and you want to see it more truly, more clearly, more deeply than surface noticing allows. And so you begin. You learn to slow your gaze, to hold your observations not in vague feelings, but in shape and space. And number. Not because numbers are cold, but because they carry clarity. They let the invisible become visible. They let the subtle leave a trail. In science, measurement is a kind of devotion, a way of returning to the same place again and again to see what has changed, like listening to the heartbeat of a thing, carefully, gently, listening not once but many times, until you start to hear a rhythm beneath the noise. But before measurement begins, you must choose what to measure. And that choice is not always simple. The world is full of things you could notice. But your question gives you direction. It guides your attention toward what is relevant, what is meaningful, what might reveal the pattern beneath the surface. This is the first discipline, to resist the temptation to measure everything, to choose instead with intention. And once chosen, you must define the how. How will you capture what you see? How often? With what scale? What counts and what remains out of view? These decisions matter. They shape your understanding. Every tool you use brings its own limitations, its own lens. A microscope can show you what the eye never could, but it also narrows the frame. A telescope opens the sky, but only a piece of it. You learn over time to live with this tension, to know that every act of measuring is also an act of shaping. You are not simply recording the world. You are in conversation with it. And so you practice care, you calibrate, you double-check. You measure not once but many times. And the more you repeat, the more the chaos begins to soften. The numbers fall into patterns. The differences begin to matter. Outliers reveal themselves. Averages form. Curves rise and fall. You are not just collecting data. You are learning to hear dot, and yet measurement is not only technical. It is deeply human dot. Think of the way a baker weighs flour. Not because they distrust their hands, but because precision leads to something beautiful. A texture, a rise, a flavor that repeats itself with grace, or a musician tuning strings, adjusting by tiny increments until harmony returns. This is what measurement can be. Not a blunt tool, but a quiet tuning fork that brings your thinking into resonance with the world. You begin to feel the poetry in precision. How even the smallest difference, a tenth of a degree, a fraction of a second, a barely noticeable curve, can hold entire truths inside it. Time itself becomes something you notice differently. You see how things change not just in moments, but in rhythms, in intervals, in the slow unfurling of change. Measurement gives shape to time. It gives form to motion. It gives you the gift of comparison. And with that, you begin to sense something deeper, relationship. Because when you measure one thing, you often discover how it moves with another. Light and angle, temperature and pressure, heart rate and emotion. One variable begins to whisper to another. These are the beginnings of pattern, the first threads of connection. You follow the numbers not to collect them, but to feel what they're pointing toward. To notice when they rise together, when they move apart, when one pulses and the other falls still. This is how science begins to draw its maps, not with roads, but with relationships. And slowly, your work becomes a kind of drawing, not with pencil and ink, but with lines of meaning traced through measurement. A graph is not just a set of dots. It is a shape of story, a curve of behavior, a portrait of something that lives and moves. Measurement turns the invisible into shape, into form, into music. You do not need to fear its precision. It is not here to silence mystery, only to bring you closer to it, because mystery does not dissolve when measured. It deepens. As your data accumulates, you begin to ask new questions. Why this pattern? Why this timing? What might this shape be trying to say? You find, again, that the answers don't live in the numbers alone. The numbers are only stepping stones, each one stable, each one necessary, but still only part of the path. The path leads inward, to meaning, and meaning cannot be measured directly. It is felt, sensed, understood in the pauses between the points. You realize that no measurement stands alone. It must be interpreted, placed in context, given shape by the mind. So, even here, even in this realm of numbers and calibration, you remain the traveler, the interpreter, the one listening for the story beneath the form. You return to your data not just as a scientist, but as a storyteller. You ask, what lives here? What wants to be seen? You sit with the results, not rushing, not forcing, but letting the form rise. Gently. And as it rises, you feel it, the quiet thrill of coherence, of something beginning to make sense, of a pattern not just noticed, but understood. But even as you understand, a new question forms. What causes this pattern? Why does it move this way? What deeper rule might be shaping what I see? Failure does not shout. It arrives quietly, a number out of place, a result that will not repeat, a shape that should have curved but falls flat. And in that moment, you feel the weight of what doesn't work. The experiment ends not in clarity, but in confusion. Pause. You wonder, did I do something wrong? Did I miss something? You double-check your tools. You reread your notes. You measure again, carefully, slowly, hoping that the world will realign. But it doesn't. The result remains the same. Unexpected. Uncooperative. True. This is the moment most people turn away. The mind doesn't like contradiction. It resists what doesn't fit. You feel the urge to erase, to discard, to try again with something neater. But if you stay inside the strange, the wrong, the broken, you begin to hear a new kind of signal, because error is not silence. It is music in a different key. At first it sounds like noise, but if you listen long enough, a pattern emerges. Mistakes are not the opposite of progress. They are its turning points. They show you where your assumptions begin to crack. They light the edge of your map. That in science, error is not failure. It is feedback. It is the place where the world interrupts your idea with its own voice. You thought you knew. You were certain, maybe. But reality says otherwise. Gently, clearly, again and again. And here is where a new beauty begins. Because if everything went as planned, you would learn only what you already suspected. You would confirm your vision, but not expand it. Error asks you to grow, to look differently, to feel around the edges of your thought and ask, what lies just beyond them? You begin to sense that every mistake is shaped by something real. Every unexpected result points not to chaos, but to a rule you haven't yet uncovered. Like footprints in snow. Not where you expected them, but leading somewhere. Even the greatest discoveries have been born from error. Think of penicillin, found in a petri dish that had been left too long, a mistake that grew mold and changed the world. Or the planet Uranus. Its orbit defied the predictions. Astronomers could have dismissed the data, but instead they listened. They followed the irregular pole and found a hidden planet beyond. These are not accidents. They are invitations to look deeper, to trust what the world is showing you, even when it doesn't fit what you hoped. Error teaches humility. It reminds you that nature is not obligated to behave as you expect. It reminds you that your mind is powerful, but not complete. And so you soften your grip. You stop forcing things to match. You begin to ask, what might this mistake be telling me? Sometimes it reveals a flaw in your method, a misstep in calculation, an unnoticed variable. These are valuable lessons. They sharpen your work. They train your eye. But sometimes the error isn't yours. It belongs to the world, to something new, something not yet known. And that's when error becomes a guide, not toward correction, but toward discovery. To follow an error is to trace the edge of what is still mysterious. It is to step into uncertainty with curiosity, not fear. You begin to feel a quiet joy in these strange moments. Not because it's easy, but because it's alive. You're no longer just testing what you know. You're discovering what you didn't even think to ask. This is where wonder grows strongest, not in certainty, but in the courage to keep listening after your first idea falls apart, and your questions begin to change. They stretch wider. They open in new directions. You wonder why a material behaves strangely under one temperature, but not another. You wonder why one species changes behavior when no variable seems to have changed. You wonder if your model is missing something deep. And so, you begin again. But now, you are guided not by your plan, but by the whisper of what surprised you. This is the hidden beauty of error. It doesn't end the story. It moves the story forward, like a sudden shift in melody, like an unexpected star in the corner of the sky. You gather your notes. You draw your new questions. You reshape your idea, not from scratch, but from the soft, luminous outline of what didn't work. In doing so, you become more than a thinker. You become a listener, because error teaches patience. It slows you down. It makes you more honest with yourself. You realize that the point is not to be right, but to be real. To let the world speak for itself through its defiance. And you begin to feel grateful, not only for what goes smoothly, but for what resists you. Because in that resistance, there is truth. Every failed test, every wrong turn, every measurement that surprises you, each one is a step toward deeper clarity. And slowly, you come to trust the process. You know now that what looks like a dead end might simply be a door you didn't yet know how to open. You no longer run from error. You walk with it. You let it guide you. You listen to the shape it leaves behind, and in that listening, you begin to notice something else. Not just error, but uncertainty. Not just surprise, but variation. A quiet chaos in the background that never fully disappears. What do when things don't repeat exactly? When the same trial brings different results? When nature shifts slightly, subtly, each time you try? You feel the next question rise. Not about failure, but about randomness. About the hidden breath of chance moving through even the most careful science. At first, the world appears chaotic. Random, disjointed, like a river full of floating leaves, all moving in different directions. You try to follow one, then another, but they scatter. The surface swirls, and nothing holds, but then something shifts. Not in the world, but in you. You begin to wait longer. You begin to watch more closely. And slowly, the scatter reveals a rhythm. A leaf floats past again, not just drifting, but following a curve. A gentle bend in the current you hadn't noticed before. It was always there. You just weren't yet quiet enough to see it. This is how the mind changes when it walks beside science. Not through force, but through slowing down, through noticing, through surrender. You learn to let go of what you expect so you can see what actually is. You see, patterns do not appear because you force them. They rise gently when your perception becomes still enough to let them come forward. The noise begins to separate. Signal from static, motion from stillness, cause from coincidence. You begin to understand how the same principle might echo across different scales. The branching of trees, the flow of rivers, the branching of your own blood vessels, all speaking in a similar shape. A pattern that repeats not exactly, but rhythmically. Fractals, you later learn. Structures that mirror themselves again and again as you zoom in or pull away. They were always in the forest, in your lungs, in lightning, in frost creeping across glass. You simply needed the eyes to see them. Science doesn't invent these patterns. It reveals them. Like dusting sand off a fossil that's already waiting in the stone. And as you look longer, your perception deepens. It sharpens not into narrow focus, but into wider understanding. You begin to connect things that once felt separate. The way the moon pulls the tide feels connected to the way gravity holds your feet to the ground. The curve of a planet's orbit echoes the curve of a tossed stone. One vast, one small, but both held by the same law. You realize that nature doesn't speak in separate languages. It speaks one deep, elegant grammar, and your mind is learning how to read. You find comfort in repetition, in how things return, in how the same pattern, when truly seen, can explain so much. Light waves and sound waves, ripples in water and ripples in space-time, the spiral of a galaxy and the spiral of a shell. You begin to understand that the world is not chaotic, but complex. And complexity is not confusion. It is depth. A depth that becomes clearer the more you allow yourself to be shaped by what you observe. What felt random before now hums with structure. Even uncertainty is formed. It is not that the world has become simpler. It is that you have learned to see with quieter eyes. Your questions shift again. Now you ask not just what, but why. This way. Why this shape? Why this rhythm and not another? Because you sense the patterns are not accidents. They emerge from rules, from causes that live beneath what you can see. And this is where science leans inward again, not away from wonder, but deeper into it, because every pattern is a clue, a hint at something hiding just beneath. And you begin to follow them not like a detective, but like a dancer learning a new step. The pattern leads. You move with it. You listen, respond, adjust. This is not control. It is relationship. A balance between noticing and responding. And as the days pass, you begin to feel these rhythms in your own breath, in the slow rise and fall of your thoughts. You become quieter inside, not less curious, but more patient, more attuned to the way the world reveals itself only in its own time. Sometimes, all you need is to sit still just a moment longer, to let the dust settle, to let your mind soften enough for the pattern to rise. It was always there. You simply had to become the kind of person who could see it. And now that you do, a new thought begins to form. If patterns are everywhere, if structure lies beneath the surface, then what makes them? What invisible forces shape what you see? What laws move beneath the visible, pulling the threads of the world into the forms they take? At first, your understanding of the world is like a map drawn in childhood. Bold shapes, clear borders, simple lines that divide things cleanly. Mountains here, oceans there, truth here, error there. You think knowledge is a destination, that once you reach it, you will know where you are. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts. The lines soften, the borders blur. The scale tilts not because the world has changed, but because you have. You begin to see that your first map was not wrong, just incomplete, that it was the beginning of seeing, but not the end. Now, new details emerge. Contours where you once saw flatness, connections where you once saw gaps, and with each discovery, the terrain changes under your feet. What you thought was solid reveals itself to be layered. What seemed far now feels close. The center of your question shifts. It no longer sits where you placed it. It moves like a tide, pulling you in a new direction you hadn't thought to look. This is the quiet truth of science. Every answer contains a door, and every door opens not to a conclusion, but to more landscape. You are no longer mapping fixed territory. You are walking through a moving field. Think of how early astronomers mapped the sky. The stars looked like pinholes in a fixed dome, set in perfect spheres, eternal, unchanging. That was their map. But as they watched, with sharper tools, with patient eyes, they noticed the heavens move. A wandering star, Mercury, didn't follow the same path. Mars paused, then looped backward. And suddenly the old map cracked. It wasn't wrong, but it no longer fit. The sky itself was bending around a truth too large to see at first glance. You feel that same tension in your own thinking. Your models grow more detailed, but also more fragile. They work until they don't. They explain until something unexpected appears. And each time that happens, you must redraw. To redraw is not failure. It is devotion. It is your way of honoring what the world truly is. You set down your pride. You let the question reshape you. You admit what you thought was certain may not be. And strangely, this brings comfort, because what replaces certainty is clarity. Not the clarity of answers, but of direction. You know where to walk next, even if you don't yet know what you'll find. Your map becomes a reflection of your humility. It stretches with your questions. It lives. You find joy in the shifting, in the way truth hides, then reveals itself in glimpses, like light behind a cloud, like wind shaping sand. Even in the natural sciences, where laws feel firm and numbers. Stay still. The deeper you look, the more movement you see. Newton's gravity was precise, a masterpiece of prediction. It mapped the fall of apples and the arc of planets. But then came Einstein. He redrew the map. He said gravity isn't just a force. It's the bending of space itself, a ripple in the fabric of reality. And suddenly, the map stretched again. Space and time became elastic. Mass became curvature. And everything you thought was straight turned gently inward. You feel that bending in your own thoughts now. You once thought the world worked like a machine. parts clicking together with mechanical certainty. But now, you feel something softer, something more fluid. A system that breathes, shifts, responds. You begin to ask different kinds of questions. Not just what is it made of, but how does it behave? What does it respond to? What patterns rise? When nothing seems to move, your questions become less about control, more about communion. And the map in your mind feels less like a chart, more like a field guide. You no longer expect one explanation to last forever. You expect evolution. You expect revision, because every insight is shaped by where you're standing. And where you stand is always changing. That's the wonder of it. Not that you reach the end, but that the horizon keeps unfolding. You now know that even your best models are models, not mirrors. They help you see that they are not the thing itself, just as a map of a forest is not the forest. It cannot hold the scent of pine, the softness of moss, the sudden call of a bird, but it helps you find your way until the path changes. And then you update. You redraw the lines, not because the old ones were bad, but because they brought you far enough to see what lies beyond them. Science is not a story of certainty. It is a story of becoming. And your mind, like your map, must remain willing to move. You begin to feel the ground shift again. A new question rising, gentle but insistent. If the map is always changing, if the shape of knowledge bends, then how do you know what direction to trust? What keeps you from losing your way in a world that doesn't stay still? You sit still. The room is quiet. The world, on the surface, seems calm. But you know better now. Beneath the quiet, things move. Invisible forces thread through every space, shaping everything, including you. Science has taught you this. That much of what is real cannot be seen with the eyes alone. It must be revealed, not with sight, but with attention. Take gravity. You can't touch it. You can't bottle it. You can't see it float through the air. And yet, you feel it, always. Holding you close to the ground, pulling the ocean into tides, tugging the moon into orbit. You don't see gravity, but you see its touch. Its fingerprints on falling leaves, on arcing comets, on the bending of time itself near massive stars. Or think of magnetism, lines of invisible force threading between two poles, spinning particles, guiding birds across hemispheres. You hold a magnet above a pile of iron filings and watch them dance into shape, a hidden geometry revealed. An unseen map made visible through its effect. And electricity, a movement of charges too small to grasp. Yet with it, you light a city. You speak across oceans. You spark thought within your own mind. These are the unseen shapers. They don't ask to be noticed. They act regardless, and through science, you've learned how to notice them. Not through direct vision, but through careful inference, delicate measurement, soft attention. You remember the first time you looked through a microscope. A drop of water transformed, suddenly alive, teeming with motion. You hadn't known that so many lives moved there. Invisible, until you found the right way to see. Now, you imagine all the worlds hidden inside your own. Molecules folding like origami. Cells speaking in chemical whispers. Photons streaming from the sun, never stopping, never resting. There. Not made up. They're not metaphor. They are there, as real as your breath, as true as your heartbeat. You just need the right lens. The right method. The right question. And suddenly, a hidden reality begins to show itself. The structure of DN, a spiral staircase too small to see, yet present in every cell, writing the instructions for life in a code 4 letters long. Or the quantum world, where particles appear to blink between being and not being, where probability replaces certainty, where light behaves like both wave and particle, depending on how you look. This isn't science fiction. This is science made gentle. This is you, learning to live with a new kind of vision. To see the invisible is not to believe blindly. It is to build evidence, slowly, carefully, like stacking pebbles into a path across a wide stream. Each step forward is based on what came before. Each discovery opens another door. And over time, what once felt impossible becomes part of your understanding. You begin to trust that there are things you can know even if you cannot touch them, like neutrinos, tiny, nearly massless particles that slip through matter like ghosts. Trillions pass through your body every second, leaving no trace, except they do leave traces. We've built vast detectors deep underground, bathed in darkness, waiting for the faintest whisper of their presence. And we've heard them. We've learned from them. We've made the invisible known, or dark matter, a kind of matter we cannot see, but we know it must be there. Its gravity holds galaxies together. Its absence would tear the universe apart. We don't yet know what it is, but we know it acts. And that is enough to let us search. This is what science does. It turns silence into signal, emptiness into map. It doesn't always give you answers. Sometimes it just gives you better questions, more refined, more precise, more attuned to what's really there. And in this way, you begin to feel less alone in the quiet, because now you can feel the presence of things that go unseen. You know, they shape your world. You know, they hold you. You know, they move through every breath you take. And so you listen more closely. You measure the invisible not with rulers, but with resonance, with patience, with the beauty of slow unfolding. You realize the more you see what's hidden, the more you understand how small you are and how connected. Your questions now feel like bridges, not over chasms, but through veils, each one a reaching hand, each one a soft unveiling. And now you wonder, if so much of the universe is invisible, yet knowable, then what else is waiting just outside the range of your senses? What other forces, delicate and true, are shaping your every moment, waiting for you to learn how to see? There is a moment after asking when nothing happens. No answer arrives, no flash of insight, no guiding hand appears, only stillness. Only the long, quiet space between the question and whatever might someday reply. This space can feel empty at first. You reach forward with your thoughts, but there is nothing to hold. You begin to wonder if you've done something wrong. If the question was too vague, too small, too bold. But in time, you come to understand something deeper. The silence isn't rejection. It's preparation. Like soil resting before spring, like a tide pulling back before it rises. Science, too, lives in this pause, between observation and theory, between testing and result, between curiosity and clarity. The mind must learn to wait. This is not the kind of waiting that taps its foot or checks its watch. This is the soft waiting of nature, the kind that trusts without rushing. You think of seeds hidden beneath winter ground. They do not question the cold. They do not hurry the thaw. They rest, knowing the warmth will come. And so, in science, you begin to practice that same kind of rest. You ask your question, then sit beside it. You listen for echoes. You watch for signs that you learn that some truths reveal themselves only when you're quiet enough to receive them. Like watching stars. You cannot rush the light. You must let it arrive in its own time, after its long journey across darkness. This patience becomes a form of seeing, not through speed, but through stillness. You notice more because you expect less. You observe with care because you no longer need control. And in this space, the mind changes. It stretches. It deepens. It stops grasping and starts absorbing. Learn to love the slow reveal, because you see, answers that come too quickly often sit on the surface. They glow for a moment but fade under pressure. But the answers that take time? They root, they hold. They become part of how you think. You think of the astronomers who waited years for the right alignment of planets, of biologists who watched generations of cells shift and grow before a pattern emerged, of physicists who let their equations sit untouched for months until one day the missing piece floated into place like a single feather finding its way down. Waiting is not empty. It is filled with preparation, with gathering, with readiness. The mind, in its patience, begins to align with the rhythm of the natural world. And that rhythm is not fast. It loops, it spirals, it pauses, it rests. You begin to see that time is not your enemy in science. It is your teacher. The more time you give, the more you see. Like standing at the edge of a forest. At first, it seems still, but after a while, you notice the flicker of wings, the slow bend of leaves, the quiet shuffle beneath the undergrowth. The forest was always alive. You just needed time to tune yourself to its pace. Your thinking slows to match the world you are trying to understand. And in this slowing, a new kind of knowledge arises. Not just facts, but insight. Not just results, but relationship. You become attuned to the invisible intervals between events, the pauses that hold as much meaning as the moments themselves. Even in the lab, this rhythm holds. You wait for the reaction. You wait for the reading. You wait for the data to make its quiet shape. And while you wait, you wonder. You imagine possibilities. You run through questions. You let your mind wander, not to escape, but to soften, to become more open to what you didn't think to expect. Because sometimes answers arrive not when you seek them, but when you're ready to hold them. You begin to see how science is not just method. It is mindset. And patience is part of that mindset. Not passive, but alert. Not idle, but spacious. It gives your thoughts room to breathe. It gives the unknown room to speak. And when the answer finally comes in a graph, in a spark, in a soft intuition, you greet it gently. You understand that its arrival is not the end. It is simply a new beginning, a new question, already forming in the quiet. Because now you know, in the space between knowing and not knowing, the most beautiful things begin to grow. And so you rest there, not impatient, not afraid, but listening. You feel the air shift as if something else is on its way. Something harder to hold, but no less real. The world moves softly. And so you must learn to speak softly too. Not with loud claims or hurried answers, but with the kind of language that listens while it speaks. Because science, at its heart, is a conversation. Not just between you and your tools, but between you and the world itself. You ask, and the universe replies, not in sentences, but in pattern, in motion, in quiet unfolding. And your task is to shape your own language to hold that kind of reply. It begins not with words, but with wonder. A feeling, not yet formed into thought. A noticing before understanding. You feel it first. Then you reach for symbols to carry what you felt. Sometimes you use numbers, a steady, structured rhythm, a way to hold precision without losing poetry. You count the stars that pass. Your lens. You measure the cooling of stone. You record the time between pulses, the weight of particles, the reach of light. And slowly, meaning begins to take shape. But numbers are not the only language you use. They carry structure, yes. The wonder needs other shapes too. So you draw. You trace spirals in notebooks. You build models from paper and wire. You map the rise of tides, the branching of trees, the curve of a question as it bends through the dark. This is science not just as logic, but as art, a language built to describe the indescribable. You reach for metaphors, those soft bridges between mystery and mind. You say, the brain is a forest. The atom is a miniature solar system. Time is a river you cannot swim upstream. These are not facts, but they are true. They are ways of pointing at what cannot yet be fully grasped. A candle in the mist. A hand stretched toward understanding. Scientists have always done this. They call gravity a well, as if mass were a weight on the stretched skin of space. They call electrons clouds, because their place is never fixed. They say evolution selects, though there is no chooser. Only consequence. Metaphor doesn't replace science. It makes it feelable. It lets your inner world touch the outer one. Because knowledge is not just data. It is resonance. It is recognition. When a theory lands in you like music, when it makes your chest feel wide, you know it has said something in your language. Over time, you begin to refine that voice. You stop asking for certainty. You start asking for connection. You notice which words carry truth without hardening it. Which diagrams invite curiosity rather than closure. Science is a practice of shaping language around silence. Around things too large to hold. You must leave room in your words for not knowing. For the deep oceans of mystery that still stretch far beyond your reach. You begin to speak, gently, because you are speaking of things that are still becoming. The birth of galaxies. The unfolding of thought. The emergence of life from chaos. You speak not to define, but to invite, and in doing so, you carry forward what scientists have always carried, a reverence for what lies just beyond the edge of understanding. You remember how Darwin described the tangled bank, a humble patch of earth teeming with life, as evidence of something deeply ordered, yet endlessly surprising. Or how Feynman spoke of the pleasure of finding things out, not because it brings certainty, but because it brings depth. These are not just men of knowledge. They are people of language. People who built bridges between fact and feeling. You learn from them that language does not just describe the world. It shapes how you experience it. Say law, and the world sounds rigid. Say pattern, and it breathes. Say theory, and might feel distant. Say possibility, and it begins to shimmer. You find yourself listening more before you speak. Listening to how the stars move. Listening to how cells divide. Listening to how your own thoughts drift and circle like birds over water. And then you speak. Not with finality, but with openness. You speak in drafts. In sketches. In questions that bloom rather than close. You use words not to explain the world away, but to let it come closer. Because the deepest truths are not shouted. They are whispered and waited for. And the most beautiful questions are not solved. They are shared. So you shape your language to carry wonder. To cradle it. To let it breathe. You write in ways that others can enter, not just read. You speak in tones that let others remember what it feels like to not know, and to love the not knowing. As you do, you feel the question within you shift again. You wonder, if language can carry wonder, then what happens when that wonder begins to move between minds? At first, it felt like truth, a shining shape in your mind. Your first idea, carefully formed, gently held. You nurtured it. You let it grow. You built your questions around it, as if it were the center of a map and everything else circled outward. You saw it everywhere. This idea. It fit the world in pleasing ways. It brought order. It made sense. And then, quietly at first, something shifts. A piece doesn't quite fit. A pattern doesn't behave the way you thought it would. At first. You doubt the pattern. You double-check. You revise your tools. You whisper to yourself, maybe it's just a mistake. Maybe I missed something. But the mismatch grows. Other data echo the same resistance. The world is not bending to meet your idea. Your idea is bending against the world. You feel it. A soft unraveling. It doesn't break all at once. But thread by thread, your beautiful certainty loosens. And now comes the hardest part. letting it go. This idea, this framework, this answer was never just a theory. It was a companion. It was part of how you saw, how you named the unknown, how you made meaning. To release it feels like losing a part of yourself, but you are learning. Science is not a path of clinging. It is a practice of unfolding. Letting go is not a failure. It is how the mind moves. It is how the mind grows. Even stars let go, collapsing, changing shape, becoming something new. And so you take a breath. You loosen your grip. You allow your first idea to float away. You watch it, not with anger, but with quiet gratitude. Because it brought you here. It gave you the ground to begin. It opened the door, and now that door leads somewhere else. You walk through it, and the strange thing is, there is no emptiness where the idea once sat. There is space, and in that space, curiosity grows again. You are reminded of how forests renew, how after a fire, a clearing appears, and in that clearing, light touches places it never reached before. New growth begins. Not despite the letting go, but because of it. Science breathes through this rhythm. Propose, test, release, reform. It is not a betrayal of thought. It is a deepening of it. Galileo let go of circles and found ellipses. Einstein let go of fixed time and found its flexibility. Marie Curie let go of invisibility and found radiation's mark. Every great step forward required someone to stop holding what once seemed whole. This is not a loss. It is an invitation. You begin to feel that again. Not defeat, but openness. Not the collapse of certainty, but the rising of possibility. Your questions don't end here. They just reshape. And the world, ever patient, offers itself again in new light. Letting go does not make you smaller. It makes you clearer, more honest, more capable of listening. You are no longer trying to shape the truth to fit your first vision. You are letting the truth shape you. And in this reshaping, something beautiful happens. You become a better questioner. You ask not to confirm, but to explore. You test not to prove, but to understand. Your curiosity becomes wider. Your doubt becomes softer. You move not like someone chasing answers, but like someone walking through a living, breathing mystery. You are no longer afraid of being wrong, because wrong is not the opposite of right. It is the path to reach it. And even here, in the letting go, you find light, like a leaf released from the branch. You do not fall, you float into a wider sky. What once was yours returns to the wind. And in return, you are given something deeper, the freedom to begin again. You pause. You breathe. You feel the quiet shift inside you, and you wonder if letting go opens the mind. What might happen when your thoughts begin to blend with the thoughts of others? It began quietly, a single question, barely formed, a hush in your thoughts like wind through distant trees. You didn't know then what it would become. You couldn't have guessed how far it would carry you. But now you look back and the trail behind you glows. Every step marked not just in time, but in transformation. Because the question you asked was not just about the world. It was about you. At first, you thought it was simple. You asked to understand something out there, a force, a pattern, a hidden structure. You asked with the quiet curiosity of a mind drawn toward mystery. But as you moved deeper, something shifted. The question grew teeth, grew roots, grew mirrors. It stopped being only about stars, or cells, or atoms. It started reflecting something back at you. You began to notice how you notice. You began to watch how you believe, how you doubt, how you hold on, how you let go. And suddenly, the question was no longer a tool. It was a teacher. It taught you patience. It taught you stillness. It taught you the difference between reaching and receiving. It taught you to wait for truth instead of shaping it. And slowly, gently, without your permission or planning, it changed you. You are no longer the same mind that first asked. You are wider now, softer, more attuned to complexity, to nuance, to silence. You feel the layers in every thought. You feel the way one idea can live beside another, not in conflict, but in conversation. You are no longer afraid of what you don't. No, you are no longer ashamed of changing your mind. This is not weakness. This is the rhythm of learning. This is the strength of curiosity. You begin to see that every deep question is a kind of doorway, and once you pass through, you cannot return the same dot. Just like light bending through a prism. You refract, you split, you reveal colors you never knew you carried. Even your way of listening has changed. Now you hear the hum beneath the surface of things. Now you notice how wonder curls at the edges of ordinary. A leaf trembling in the light. A drop of water catching gravity's pull. The way a spider builds with no blueprint, only knowing. You are no longer just seeking answers. You are living in relationship with questions. This question, the one you began with, still lives in you. But it no longer asks for resolution. It asks for presence, and you give it that. Not to close it, but to stay near it. Because some questions are not solved. They are dwelled in. They shape how you see, how you speak, how you move through the world. You find yourself noticing things you used to pass by. You find yourself slowing down to feel the texture of an idea before explaining it. You speak with more care. You listen with more depth. And when you wonder all the way in with your whole being. The science, yes, the structures, the data, the design, all of it matters. But now you know that the most powerful part of discovery was what shifted inside you. The rearranging of your expectations. The softening of your certainties. The realization that the world is not made to be conquered, but to be known. Slowly, with reverence. You are not here to solve everything. You are here to participate in the unfolding. And the question that once felt sharp, urgent, even heavy, now feels light. Like a breath. Like an invitation. It led you inward, even as it reached outward. It wove your thoughts into the wider fabric of nature. You began by asking, what is true? And you discovered what is true is also beautiful. And what is beautiful can change you. So you let yourself be changed. You surrender to it. Not because you are finished, but because you are ready to ask again. This time with deeper roots, with gentler hands. With eyes that have seen the slow dance of not knowing as a form of love. And now, a new question begins to stir. It whispers, if questions can transform you alone, what might happen when minds begin to transform each other? You thought perhaps that asking would bring you closer to certainty. That with each answer, a piece of the world would lock into place. Clear, complete, whole. But now you know. Each answer is a doorway. Each explanation opens into more questions. And strangely, you no longer want it any other way, because something inside you has shifted. You don't need to know everything to feel wonder. You don't need to hold all the pieces to feel the shape of the whole. In fact, it is the ungrasped, the undefined, the horizon just out of reach that stirs your deepest awe. There's a kind of softness in this not knowing. Not the anxious kind, not confusion, but the quiet hum of being near something. Vast. Like standing beside the ocean at night. You can't see where it ends. You don't need to. You listen to the waves. You feel the cool salt air. And that is enough. The unknown becomes not an enemy to overcome, but a companion. You walk beside it. It walks beside you. Science does not. Banish mystery. It deepens it. Look closely at a leaf, and you'll see cells. Look closer, and the cells dissolve into molecules. Closer still, into atoms. And then, into strange flickers of probability, where location and certainty disappear. And still, the leaf rustles in the wind. Still, the tree grows. Still, you breathe. Even when you understand, you do not exhaust the beauty. You do not reach the bottom. You only widen the silence between thoughts. That is the paradox. The more you know, the more you realize how much you'll never fully hold. But this isn't defeat. This is the invitation. A scientist is not someone who knows everything. A scientist is someone who keeps listening, who remains curious even when clarity fades, who follows a question even when it leads into the unknown. You have become that kind of person. You used to ask to fix things in place. Now you ask to move more freely. You used to fear what you didn't understand. Now you feel drawn toward it. You've learned to rest in the spaces between answers, to find comfort in questions that stretch beyond your reach, like stars across the sky. Too far to touch, but bright enough to guide you. Even your breath follows this rhythm. Inhale, seeking. Exhale, surrender. You breathe with the question. You sleep beside it. You wake into it, and somewhere along the way, the urgency to know has softened into the joy of wondering. You begin to notice how nature teaches without explanation. The moon doesn't explain its pull, but the tides rise. Anyway, the birds don't diagram flight, but the air lifts their wings. The river doesn't plan its path, but it finds its way, in their silence. They know, and in your silence, you begin to know too. Not in words, but in feeling. Not in definitions, but in presence, you begin to trust that knowing isn't always the goal. Sometimes, the goal is simply to stay open, to remain alert to what unfolds without needing to hold it tight. You start to live as if the world were a poem, rather than a formula, and even science, with its tools, its numbers, its measurements, begins to feel like a kind of listening. You are not building a cage around nature. You are building a bridge, and you cross it slowly, step by step, with your questions in hand and your heart wide open. This not knowing, this endless sky, it does not diminish you, it humbles you. It holds you. It calls you forward. Because what you've learned most of all is that wonder isn't something you solve. It's something you live. Even now, especially now, you carry more questions than ever before, but they feel lighter. More like wings than weights. You are no longer trying to wrap the world in certainty. You are learning to dance with its mystery. And as you rest here, in the hush of thought, in the quiet curve of sleep, you realize the most beautiful part of science is not what it explains. It's how gently it teaches you stay amazed, and somewhere in that amazement, you begin to sense another kind of question. Not about facts or forces, but about connection. What is it that you are really asking? Not just the surface question, the shape of a problem, the slope of a graph, the twist in a theory, but the question behind that one. The one that pulses quietly beneath your calculations, your observations, your careful words. It is always there, soft, persistent, like a low note humming beneath the melody. Sometimes you ask about light or gravity or time. Sometimes about cells or species or the unfolding of stars. But beneath those questions, another stirs. A question not about what the world is, but about why you are reaching for it. What draws you here, again and again, to the edge of the unknown? What are you really seeking when you test and measure and wait? It isn't only knowledge, not just information. It is meaning. You ask to feel the world more fully, to be in conversation with it, to be part of something vast, and in being part of it, to be known, even as you know. Science may begin with curiosity, but it deepens with wonder. And wonder, at its quiet core, is a longing to belong. That's what drives you, even if you don't say it aloud. Even if it hides behind your instruments, behind the logic, behind the numbers. You are not just asking how things work. You are asking, where do I fit? Why does this matter? What am I made of? And what am I meant for? Even in your simplest experiments, there is something tender, a hope that the universe will respond, that it will show you something real, something true. You don't want to control it. You want to meet it, and slowly, gently, as your questions deepen, you begin to see the world is not mute, it speaks, in equations, in orbits, in spiral shells, and falling rain, it speaks through the language of pattern, of symmetry and surprise. And when you listen closely, you hear not only answers, but invitations. Each discovery, no matter how small, is not a final word, but an opening, a new way of seeing, a new way of being. And so you keep asking, not to conquer the unknown, but to become more fully present within it, because behind your search for truth is your search for connection. Behind your questions about the stars is your longing for place. Behind your study of matter is your desire to feel the mystery within your own body, and that is not weakness. That is where science begins, not in distance, but in intimacy. You are not apart from what you study. You are a thread in the same cloth, made of the same atoms, driven by the same laws, shaped by the same history as the stars you name and the cells you examine. So it makes sense that behind every question is the quiet presence of the questioner. Your story, your senses, your breath. You think you are searching the world, but in truth, you are also searching yourself. And slowly, the line between the two blurs. As you ask, you are shaped. As you explore, you are revealed. You don't just discover facts. You discover your own capacity for wonder, for patience, for change. Even the act of asking is an act of trust. You ask because you believe the universe has something to say. You ask because, somehow, you know there is more to feel, more to find, more to become. And so, behind every method is a meaning. Behind every theory is a hope that your questions will lead you somewhere not only beautiful, but true. And in finding that truth, you will find some small mirror of yourself. You don't always realize it. But with every experiment, you're reaching inward as much as outward, reaching toward clarity, toward coherence, toward a sense that your life, too, is part of this strange, intricate design. You may not find every answer, but you are beginning to understand that the asking itself is sacred. The way you hold a question, gently, curiously, openly, shapes the kind of mind you become and the kind of world you help to reveal. So the question behind all questions may not be one of fact. It may be a question of relationship. How do you live in this universe now that you've seen its depth? How do you carry its mystery without needing to resolve it? How do you live as both the observer and the observed? You have come far. From the first flicker of curiosity to the quiet awe of not knowing. And yet, you are still just beginning. Still learning how to hold wonder without trying to close it. Still learning how to live the question. Still wondering, softly, reverently, what else there is to find. And just as this question settles in you, another begins to rise. You have asked. You have searched. You have measured, wondered, waited. Now, you arrive at a stillness. Not an ending, not a conclusion, but a hush. A pause between the inhale of curiosity and the next breath of discovery. This is the quiet between questions. A soft valley between peaks of thought. A gentle low tide after the wave of asking has pulled back. And in this moment, you do not reach. You do not chase. You simply rest. There is something sacred about this kind of silence. It does not demand. It does not solve. It only holds. You feel it now, this space that opens within you, as if your thoughts are stepping aside, so something deeper can enter. This is not emptiness. It is readiness, like soil, still and undisturbed, waiting for a seed. Or a canvas blank, but already humming with potential. You have done the work of thinking. Now your mind softens, unfolds, breathes. You begin to notice things you missed in the noise of solving. The way your breath curls at the edges. The rhythm of your heartbeat. The warmth of the question that still lingers, not needing to be answered, only felt. This pause is part of science too. It lives in the spaces between data points, in the dark between stars, in the long stretches of not knowing that stretch across weeks, years, a lifetime. Ask any scientist, and they will tell you there are seasons of pursuit and seasons of stillness. You are in the latter. Now it may feel unfamiliar. You've been taught to value action, to press forward, to always look for the next thing. But now, you are learning a subtler rhythm. The rhythm of waiting, of listening, of trusting that silence is not the absence of thought, but the deepening of it. Sometimes, the most important discoveries arrive not in the moment of doing, but in the stillness after and the pause where your mind, no longer grasping, can finally receive. This quiet teaches you things that noise cannot. It shows you how little you control. It reminds you that the world unfolds in its own time. That questions like seeds do not bloom on demand. They ripen slowly, in the dark, in silence, in spaces you cannot force open. So you wait, not with impatience, but with a kind of reverence. You feel the hum of everything you've gathered still moving in you. Ideas not lost, only drifting deeper, settling into new shapes. Even in your quiet, the question is working, like roots threading through soil in the dark, like a galaxy wheeling. Onward, silent, but not still. You begin to realize this moment of rest is not separate from the search. It is the search. You are still in motion. Even now, you are still listening. The brain, too, knows this rhythm. It pulses not in constant thought, but in waves. Even at rest, it simmers, comparing, reflecting, reshaping what it holds. In fact, some of your clearest insights may rise not while you focus, but when you let go, when you walk or breathe or dream. And in these quiet moments, the connections you didn't know you were making find their place. Your thoughts rearrange. Your mind rewrites its maps. Not loudly, but with the gentleness of falling snow. This is the mystery of incubation, of slow unfolding, and science honors it. Many discoveries are born not at the lab bench, but during a walk, a nap, a pause. Because rest is not the opposite of inquiry. It is its companion. You are learning now to hold space for what has not yet arrived. To let your curiosity stretch into stillness. To sit quietly in the sacred unknown. And in that sitting, you begin to feel a flicker. Faint at first, but unmistakable. A new question, not yet formed, not yet spoken, but breathing beneath the surface. It does not rush you. It only waits. You feel its pull, not with urgency, but with warmth. As if the question already knows you are becoming ready for it. And so you remain still, letting your thoughts loosen, letting your breath guide you. You are no longer trying to have the next idea. You are letting it come to you, and it will. Not all at once, but in whispers. Like mist rising over a quiet lake, the new question will take shape, but not now, not yet. For now, you rest in the hush between what was and what might be. You rest in the space that holds the future like a cradle. And as you breathe in this quiet, you begin to feel it stir. A new wonder, waiting just. Beyond the silence, there is a softness to endings. Not a door slamming shut, but a slow fade-like dusk folding itself into night. You've walked far through this inner world of wonder, asked without fear, waited without demand. Now, You find yourself not at the edge of answers, but standing in the dark, where beginnings quietly gather. You do not need to speak now. You do not need to know. This is a time for resting, for letting the journey settle like stars into still water. In science, as in sleep, there is a rhythm, a winding down before anything can begin again. The mind, like the body, has seasons. Moments of reaching and moments of returning inward. Moments when you push forward and moments when you simply float. Now, you float. You close your eyes, but your mind remains open. Not wide with effort, but soft, receptive, unfolded like petals. After rain. This is not emptiness. This is potential. All the thoughts you've gathered, the questions you've loved, the strange ideas that clung to your skin like static, they are still here. But now they hum beneath the surface, quiet and alive. You imagine your thoughts like roots spreading unseen beneath the earth, doing their quiet, invisible work while the world above sleeps. And you are that earth, still, dark. Holding. Science is not only made in the bright hours of discovery, it is also made in sleep, in forgetting, in silence. When you dream, your brain stirs with the same chemicals that flicker through curiosity. You process, you reshape, you unknow and reimagine. Even in the dark, your neurons whispered to each other, making bridges where there were none. New questions are born not in fire and thunder, but in this hush, this soft, secret drift of thought. As you lie still, you feel it, a new shape forming. You cannot name it yet. You do not try. Sometimes, what we understand too soon, we understand too narrowly. So instead, you let the shape remain vague, like a star glints just off center. Not looked at directly, but sensed, felt, believed in. This is how most great ideas begin, not with certainty, but with a glow. And your mind, now stilled, is glowing. You remember the moments along this journey, the silence before a question formed, the invisible weight of an assumption, the beauty inside a failed attempt, the strange joy of waiting. Each of these remains with you, not as facts, but as feelings, memories braided into understanding. You do not need to carry them like burdens. They carry you. And now, as your breathing slows, you feel yourself dissolving into the dark. Not vanishing, no. Transforming. Like a leaf falling not to end, but to become soil. Like a wave sinking not to disappear, but to become part of the ocean again. The dark is not a void. It is a womb. It is the quiet where the next question sleeps. And in that darkness, the universe hums. It hums with possibilities still unnamed, with patterns not yet noticed, with truths that one day you or someone like you will gently uncover. You feel connected to that great unfolding, not as its center, but as one thread in its fabric. You are not alone here. Other minds have wandered the same quiet paths. Other hearts have listened to this same dark music. All of science, all of curiosity, is a shared breath. You breathe in now, slowly. You breathe out. You are resting inside something vast. And somewhere, far beyond your thoughts, another mind is beginning its first question. Somewhere, another heartbeat stirs with wonder. It is all connected. The known and the nesh. Unknown. The silence and the sound. The pause and the reaching. And so you drift, not backward, not forward, but inward, toward something just beginning. Toward a question still wrapped in silence. Toward the next gentle unfolding of this beautiful, restless mind you carry. And though you may not wake knowing, you will wake changed, because something inside you, soft as night, brave as dawn, is already beginning again.